Machiavelli argues that devastation might ensure short-term control, but it ultimately destroys the potential for a prosperous state. In Nigeria, systemic corruption, neglect of critical infrastructure, and stifling of innovation are similar to devastation. Welcome to the class of history, politics, and power. In this class, I am a learner. What is the theme of the class? It is devastation as a strategy of power and control of the state. Let's go into it. So, in this class, I will look at the book The Prince by Niccolo Machiavelli. I decided to refer to the book because of my recent encounter with a powerful member of the Nigerian power class. I got a call from his personal assistant that he would like to talk to me. He came on the phone and greeted me warmly. He requested for a meeting with me in his house. We agreed on a date and I flew in. All he wanted was to pick my brain on the question of power for posterity in a land riddled with unbridled poverty, a land besieged by dedicated violence. This member of the political class is tired of the present system. And mind you, he helped build and nurture the system. But he's beginning to feel a sense of remorse. We had the meeting in his study. I must confess, he has a splendid collection of books on all subjects. But the part of his study that wowed me was the section on books on power and esoteric thoughts. This section of his study is locked in a well-constructed shelf with non-transparent glass cover. You can only see the books when he opens it. Something struck me immediately. That this man, that some activists come out to criticize regularly, take the study of power seriously. They read about them, they invite scholars, consultants to talk to them. They are prepared for power. They don't underrate the situation. They read them critically. I saw books there. Let me introduce you to one or two books I saw in his study. I saw this book, The Law of Human Nature. This book, The Law of Human Nature, by Robert Greene. Robert Greene is the author of the 48 Laws of Power. I have my own copy of the Laws of Human Nature. This is my copy. Reading this book means you want to become an apprentice in human nature. You want to understand human nature. So I saw this book in the shelf of my guest, and I think you should have a copy of this book. You should have a copy if you are interested in power. Another book I saw in the shelf of my guest is another book by Robert Greene, The 50th Law. The 50th Law. I can comfortably tell you that The man of power that I visited can be described as a student of Robert Greene. He has every work written by Robert Greene. And the works of Robert Greene are on the table. The 50th Law, 50 Cent and Robert Greene. Have you read this book? I recommend this book to you. It's about power. The ultimate hustle is to move freely between the street and corporate worlds, to find your flow and never stay locked in the same position. Power is a serious game. If you want to displace the men and women that have held the Nigerian state down, it cannot be done just on the powers of activism. It must be done on the powers of knowledge, critical knowledge and strategy. That is the power game. Talking about the man of power, I could see from our discussion that he is far deeper than his public image shows. He knows what he wants and goes about achieving them with strategic plot, sometimes to devastating end. That some of us underestimate the intellectual capacity of men like him calls for deeper reflection. I saw a man knowledgeable in the game of power. No wonder they remain in charge in Nigeria. Now, he has invited me to help him resolve a question about the future that is giving him sleepless nights. Anyway, let me leave the story, for the details are private. I mentioned this meeting because of one of the books we made reference to in our discourse. It is one of the books he reads, and the title of the book is The Prince by Machiavelli. I saw it there. Different versions of the book. So I thought I should discuss a part of the book with you. And after reading the book again, I came out with this part for your viewing pleasure. Machiavelli says in the book, The Prince, that when states newly acquired have been accustomed to living freely under their own laws, there are three ways to hold them securely. One is by devastating them. Two is by going and living there in person. And three, by letting them keep their own laws, exerting tribute, and setting up an oligarchy which will keep the state friendly to you. So my interest in this class of learners is one, by devastating them. That first option, by devastating them. Applying the argument of devastation to Nigeria, where oppressive leadership, systemic corruption, and injustice have stifled innovation, where poor governance have unleashed poverty and created a cycle of violence, parallels can be drawn with Machiavelli's principles on governance and subjugation of states. Nigeria's current challenges, particularly in its governance structures and socio-political dynamics, reflect the outcomes of a state poorly managed after being acquired in Machiavelli's terms. A former governor of Imo State, Achike Udenwa, defines an acquired state.
And of course, even if I don't vote for you, you can buy your way through. If you have the right amount of money in your hand, you can buy your way through.
How? How do they do that?
Well,
Can you buy INEC?
Ask the courts.
When you say buy your way through,
Yeah, ask
you
the
buy
courts.
the voters?
Ask the courts.
You buy the voters?
Buy everything.
You buy INEC?
Everybody.
You buy police?
Everybody.
You buy the army?
Everybody. You buy them all.
So our election is about buying.
Yes, please. And that is one thing we must curb.
In Machiavelli's framework, one way to hold a newly acquired state is by devastating it. In Nigeria, devastation manifests not as outright destruction, but through systemic oppression, corruption, and mismanagement of resources. The government's inability or unwillingness to address poverty, unemployment, and insecurity has devastated the populace's ability to thrive, leaving citizens disempowered and dependent on the state or oligarchic structures for survival. What has the Nobel laureate Wole Soyinka got to say?
Who are the gangbangers of the nation's future? We know them. They are defined. We know the military, and there are others. The others, however, very often lack immediate identification, but they're especially dangerous. But we know them, so do you all. They are the ones who, even while claiming to defend the rights and entitlements of their constituencies, do little more than defend the rights and entitlements of their privileged existence. They are the generator contractors in whose interest it is that the national electric system never works. They are the minority who conspire to run down the health system of this nation, since they can then divert its allocation to their own and their families' excursion to Wiesbaden for annual checks and fly to New York to cure the toothache. They are the ones who systematically destroyed the educational system, which we took for granted throughout our own past, that has engendered this present.
This devastation of the Nigerian state by military and civilian leaders ensures that the majority remain focused on survival rather than resistance or rebellion. It also limits the potential for innovation and economic growth, which could empower citizens to challenge the ruling class. Let's draw on examples of military leaders that have used devastation as a strategy of power. Let's look at Ibrahim Babangida. I call him the master of illusion. Babangida came to power not with thunder, but with cunning. Charismatic and calculating, he cast himself as a modernizer, a soldier in love with democracy's promise, yet ever unwilling to surrender its reins. Babangida smiled while pulling strings. He ruled through persuasion and subversion. Babangida built a palace of mirrors in which truth was often distorted and trust carefully rationed. Under Babangida's regime, Nigeria witnessed the Structural Adjustment Program, SAP, an economic experiment that was sold as salvation, but the program delivered suffering. Suffering is devastation. Under Babangida, under SAP, subsidies vanished, prices soared, jobs dried up, industries collapsed. The people, already burdened by poverty, were told to tighten their belts. Babangida forgot that the people no longer had belts. Babangida's SAP policies reminds me of Tinubu's economy. Infrastructure crumbled while corruption grew under Babangida. Corruption fed the appetite of a few at the cost of the many. Babangida even executed his colleagues in the army. They said they were coup plotters. That is devastation. Delegiwa was bombed under Babangida's watch. That is devastation. Babangida spoke the language of reform, but practiced the art of delay. Babangida promised elections only to annul them when the result did not favor his circle. When the people protested, they were gunned down in the street.
As consultant to MAMSA in the company of Friday Onoge, we talked about the fact that a government does not really need a PRO. The work of a government is the public relations for government. So a government does not need to set up an organization to tell people that it is good. People know what is good when they see it. So government should just do what is good. And once it does that, it doesn't need a mouthpiece to tell the people that it is doing well.
So did Babangida understand that concept?
He, to a point, understood it, but then he was overpowered by his own ambition, overpowered by the ambition to be a president, to convert from the military to a civilian president.
He wanted that?
Definitely he did, because he went on disqualifying people who wanted to contest election. He went on nullifying the election which took place and wanted Nigeria to start all over again. And that's what Professor Oyediran called transition without end. It means that we'll continue to have elections after elections, and there will be one reason or the other that the big man will nullify it. That's to show that there was something that we were not told.
So he was deceiving the people?
Definitely he did.
He knew what he was doing?
Definitely he knew what he was doing. It wasn't an accident.
How come political scientists like you, the Omo Moris, did not know what was going on?
Fortunately, some of us had doubts. But a military man is also trained in deception, in decoy. And so all along he knew what to do, but he was also clever to make sure that for every move, there is also a pleasant move in support.
The June 12, 1993 election, widely regarded as the freest and fairest in Nigerian history, was aborted at the altar of ambition. A nation that had briefly tasted hope was plunged back into despair. Babangida ruled by closed and open brutality, by erosion of faith, by erosion of systems. Babangida destroyed national unity, and when the tides of outrage became too strong to dam, he stepped aside rather than face the reckoning. Like Machiavelli warned, devastation may keep the palace secure, but the streets will remember the hunger. Babangida forgot that fear is not forever. If you sow fear alone, you reap flight. Ask Babangida, he will explain. Having spoken about Babangida, it reminds me of the power of intellectual thinking as a means to power. I have been asking questions. Why have Nigerians not been able to exact themselves to achieve good governance? Why have the so-called good people, why have they not been able to attain power? That is not to say that everybody that have attained power is bad. No. There are burning questions that arise regularly within me. And one of them is, why have the Nigerian people not been able to exert themselves to achieve good governance? And why have the many good people who are interested in power have not been able to attain power? That is not to say that some persons in power are not good. But how come power have not been used in the interest of the common good? And my research is telling me that many Nigerians who are interested in power but cannot attain it in any way are not setting up the structures to attain power. They are not being strategic about it. Many of them are just dreamers. They are not acting. They are not studying. They are not deeply researching about power. Now, if you are interested in power, you should be interested in this book. It is entitled The Third Wretch in Power: How the Nazis Won Over the Hearts and Minds of a Nation. The author is Richard Evans. The Third Wretch in Power: How the Nazis Won Over the Hearts and Minds of a Nation. Look at the book. It's a book about power. I want to read from page 7 of the book. The author said, Adolf Hitler's party, founded in 1919, was more dynamic, more ruthless, and more violent than other extreme right-wing fringe groups. In 1923, it felt confident enough to try a violent coup d'etat in Munich as a prelude to a march on Berlin along the lines of Mussolini's successful march on Rome the previous year. But it failed to win over the army or the forces of political conservatism in Bavaria, and the coup was dissipated in a hail of gunfire. Hitler was convicted and put into Landsberg prison, where he dictated his autobiographical political tract, My Struggle, to his dog buddy, Rudolf Hess. Not a blueprint for the future, to be sure, but a compendium of Hitler's ideas, above all, anti-Semitism, and the idea of a racial conquest of Eastern Europe for all who cared to read it. Richard Evans in the book continues, by the time Hitler came out of prison, he had assembled the ideology of Nazism from disparate elements of anti-Semitism, pan-Germanism, eugenics, and so-called racial hygiene. By that time, Hitler has also worked on geopolitical expansionism, hostility to democracy, and hostility to cultural modernism, which had been floating around for some time, but had not so far been integrated into a coherent whole. You see, if leaders want to devastate the state, the first thing they do is to be hostile to the norms of democracy. It is happening in Nigeria as we speak. They become hostile to the doctrine of democracy. They subvert elections. They subvert the rules of the National Assembly. They capture the judiciary. They impoverish the people. You can see Hitler's plan as being read here. The author said that Hitler gathered around him a team of immediate subordinates. And one of them is the talented propagandist, Joseph Goebbels. Have you read about Joseph Goebbels? I have a book on Joseph Goebbels. Hitler also brought around him the decisive man of action, Hermann Göring and others, who built up his image as leader and reinforced his sense of destiny. Look at the Nigerian scenario. It is similar to what I'm reading. If you are able to lay your hands on this book, you will be on the road to power. But what do you want to do with the power? That is another question. So I recommend this book to you if you are interested in power, history, and politics. It's about how the Nazis won over the hearts and minds of a nation. Have you asked why sometimes the oppressed celebrate the oppressor? If you read this book, you will know why. You know, in Nigeria, some poor Nigerians can die for the leaders oppressing them. So you will know how they do it. It is the secret to power. The understanding, then the implementation is something else. Yes, you have read the book. Then you go further to implement. Power is a struggle. So Adolf Hitler rose from the ruins of World War I Germany, promising a revival to a humiliated nation. With words sharp as daggers, he stirred the anger of the masses and fed them a vision of racial purity and national greatness. He rebuilt roads and factories, yes, but he also burnt books. He banned dissent and built death camps. He made fear a national currency. For a time, Hitler controlled everything. Cities fell before his armies. Leaders trembled at his threats. But Hitler forgot that control built on devastation cannot endure. Tell Nigerian leaders that control built on devastation cannot endure. Adolf Hitler ruled with terror, but terror cannot love. He silenced opposition, but silence cannot sing the songs of hope. Let me remind you of this quote by Machiavelli. Indeed, there is no surer way of keeping possession than by devastation. Whoever becomes the master of a city, accustomed to freedom, and does not destroy it, may expect to be destroyed himself. This theory is being applied in Nigeria. The leaders have refused to build good schools. The hospitals are being devastated by poor funding. University education is being underfunded. It is deliberate. It is part of the strategy of devastation. Devastate them so that they will be struggling for survival and not have the capacity for rebellion. Make the lecturers poor. Make the teachers poor. Frustrate the doctors so that they can run away. Because they believe in their dictionary that devastation keeps them in power. And they have read it from the books of power, where devastation is a strategy. That's why the books I'm recommending to you in this class, where everyone is a learner, including the presenter, we need to read those books to be able to challenge the status quo. Even Adolf Hitler challenged the status quo in Germany and took power. If you read this book, this particular book, if you read this book, you will see the rise of Adolf Hitler. He wanted power, but he was a nobody. But they began to strategize, and they rose to power. That is why it is titled The Third Reach in Power, How the Nazis Won Over the Hearts and Minds of a Nation. It's a game. It took them some time. Hitler even had to go to prison. It's a struggle. So in the end, having acquired power, Adolf Hitler misused it. As World War II continued with its devastations, bombs fell on Berlin, and Hitler's once mighty army crumbled. He wanted to conquer the world. That powerful Hitler hid on the ground like a frightened animal. He took his own life in a bunker, while his dream of 1,000-year reach died in flames above. He had conquered land, but never mind. He built a movement, but he didn't build a nation. Machiavelli warned that devastation may bring short-term obedience, but it leaves behind no prosperity, no peace, only ashes. Hitler's legacy is a graveyard of millions and a lesson carved into the conscience of humanity. I will introduce more books to you. Get ready for power. But power for what? Power for what? By the time you gain power, are you going to behave like the present leaders that are devastating the state? I recommend this book to you. I'm not reading from them. I want you to go read them. But they are powerful books. Mastery by Robert Greene. Mastery. Mastery by Robert Greene. Mastery by Robert Greene. I won't tell you more, but I've shown you the book. It's about mastery of power, learning as a tool to attain success. How often do you learn? Apprenticeship in the game of power. Mastery is a must-read for those aiming to touch the sky. Have you read this by Robert Greene? The Art of Seduction. You know, in the past, I will not introduce these books, but I've decided to say no. It is time you get them. And you begin to say things from different angles. And you now begin to confront the issues before you, the national challenge before you. You now begin to see yourself as having the opportunity to get power. Power for the common good. Power for posterity. Power for advancement of humanity. The Art of Seduction. These are some of the books the men of power read. And you should be reading them to be able to understand the secret behind their continuous hold on power, devastating the people and unleashing poverty and violence on the state. The violence you see in Borno, the violence you see in the southeast of Nigeria, the bandits you see, these are tools of devastation. Yes, they are product of the actions of the leadership class. And with that, the devastation of the state continues. So I've introduced 5 books to you in this class. I've introduced The Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene. I have introduced The 50th Law by 50 Cent and Robert Greene. I have introduced Mastery by Robert Greene to you. And I have introduced The Art of Seduction, also by Robert Greene. I have introduced The Third Reich in Power, How the Nazis Won Over the Hearts and Minds of a Nation. These are books you should read. I also know that sometimes power often begins as a tool for change, but can devolve into a pursuit of self-interest. Many Nigerian leaders have not been able to guard against the corrupting influence of power. That is why the noble ambitions of some turn into vehicles for personal gain.
Nigeria is held together by corruption. The day you remove corruption of this country will come collapsing. If it is sacrilegious, yes.
Is it not unity that keeps us?
No. Which unity? We are moving towards a so-called protest in this country. What has it become? Has it not become the mutual acrimony of antagonistic ethnic nations? Are the Yorubas not pursuing, don't strike because a Yoruba man is there, and the North is saying, no, you are going, and they are saying, oh, leave Lagos, the Igbos should leave Lagos. So what kind of nation are you talking about? What kind of unity?
Is it not a nation?
No, we are not even a state.
You're not a state?
No.
Professor Araoye?
Yes, I will explain that in future sessions. There's something called deflation. What we do in Africa, we take a concept and hollow out the concept and infuse them with, their complete antagonistic, visions of what the original should be, and give it the name democracy.
Professor Araoye, you served in the foreign service.
Yes.
Of this country.
Yes, I did.
It's a state.
Well, the nominal state. Look, let me tell you this. Stephen Krasner identifies 4 levels of sovereignty which defines statehood: domestic sovereignty, international legal sovereignty, and 2 others that I can't corner. What keeps the African state, not just Nigeria, going is international legal sovereignty. I can tell you, in the last 2-3 years, how many letters have gone to the British Parliament, to the Secretary of the National Nation, denouncing this state by elements in this country who don't recognize the statehood of this country.
That is their opinion.
Yeah, that is
but it's a state.
That is their opinion, but legitimacy arises from the opinion and the perceptions of the citizens.
It is still a legitimate state. It has a president. It has governors. It has a Supreme Court.
It has the paraphernalia of statehood.
It has the Nigerian army.
It has the paraphernalia of statehood.
Sani Abacha is an example of a Nigerian leader that used devastation as a means to power and control of the state. I am giving military men as examples. In subsequent classes, we'll look at the so-called Democrats who have devastated their states in Africa, in Nigeria. If Babangida ruled with a velvet glove, Sani Abacha gripped Nigeria with an iron fist. He emerged from the shadows of military politics and built his empire on silence and fear. Where others negotiated, he crushed. Where dissent rose, he buried it, sometimes literally. Abacha did not pretend to be a Democrat. He made no speeches about hope or reform. His language was the decree, his parliament the gun. Activists vanished, journalists were jailed, the air in Nigeria grew heavy, and the night darker under his watch. He looted the treasury with a quiet efficiency, siphoning billions into secret accounts, while roads rotted and hospitals became death chambers. Abacha surrounded himself with sycophants, draped in uniforms, who mistook terror for loyalty and obedience for love. The people endured him, not because they admired him, but because they feared what might follow resistance. But power built on devastation is always unstable. Even the most fortified fortress trembles when its foundation is cracked by injustice. Then came his end, not in a palace coup or a popular uprising, but in death sudden and strange. He died as abruptly as he ruled, surrounded not by weeping crowds, but by whispers and rumors. What remains of Abacha today is not a legacy, but a cautionary tale. His name is etched not in marble, but in audit and repatriated funds. A man who once controlled everything, yet now represents all that can go wrong when power forgets the people. Machiavelli wrote that it is better to be feared than loved, but never to be hated. Abacha crossed that line, and with him, the nation nearly did too.
We were told that there were intelligence reports about this and that and so on. But then the intelligence reports came before the election. It should have been used before the election, not after the election.
Babangida said if he did not annul the election, there would have been a military coup.
That's how it's unfortunate that a general would chicken out of that.
Did he chicken out?
Yeah, well, he was commander-in-chief. So if he had an idea there would be a coup, he should have gone ahead to deal with the coup.
Eventually, he set up the interim national government. And there was a coup. Abacha took over.
Of course.
Was that a coup?
Well, in a way, it wasn't a coup. It was an arrangement. Because that's already inscribed in the interim national government decree, that if Shonekan fails, then the most senior military man should take over. First of all, why would you think that Shonekan will fail? To say that he will fail means that you already assume he should fail. And then you have appointed somebody to take over.
And he took over.
And he took over. So it wasn't a coup, it was a succession. And it was planned.
And Abacha began his lies.
And Abacha then decided that he would stay on. And he decided, he went ahead to establish political parties, dissolved all the parties, and then decided to establish 5 political parties. And Chief Bola Ige described those 5 political parties as 5 fingers on a leprous hand, because they were the same. They were on the same hand. They were all, you just split the same thing into 5. And eventually, the 4 of the 5 parties accepted Abacha as their candidate for the presidency. Technically, Abacha wasn't a member of any of the parties. So how come the parties now adopt him? as their presidential candidate. The normal rule is that a presidential candidate will be one of the members of the political party. In this case, a party was appointing somebody not in their party to become the president of the country.
The plan was that he would be the consensus candidate.
Well, if it's going to be consensus, then you allow the parties to vote and concede that. Not that the leaders would say, he's our man. Because there has also been what some of us see as organized support. Boys asking for Abacha. And everybody, they say...
Youth earnestly ask for Abacha. Led by Dan Ekanu?
Yes. And so...
The 2 million man march.
Yeah, a million march man and that kind of thing. All that drama was going on. So it wasn't as if the thing was normal. It's organized, it's orchestrated.
He lied to Abiola. Abiola fell for his lies.
Yeah, Abiola fell for his lie because they had been together for years. And there was a level of trust. So the lie was also a betrayal.
He said he was going to hand over
He said he was going to hand over.
And Abiola
nominated some of the members of the executive for him. So everything was going well, but the man who is a strategist and master of deception played him out and eventually arrested him. And of course, he died in the custody.
Abacha also died at some point.
Well, Abacha died. All sorts of stories about that. But what we know is that he died. And Abiola also died, mysteriously too.
So what we have established, that Babangida lied and ended up badly.
Right.
Abacha lied.
Of course.
And ended up badly.
Yeah.
The other books by Robert Greene that I want you to read is this very popular one, The 48 Laws of Power. The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. The 48 Laws of Power. Have you read the 33 Strategies of War? The 33 Strategies of War by Robert Greene. Get these books and see what happens to your thinking about power and politics. But let me warn, you must interpret them well, or you become an oppressor when you gain power. That is why I highly recommend these books. But I trust you. You have the capacity to be good. We need good men in power to counter the hegemonic forces holding the Nigerian state down. It's a game of mental strength. Don't underrate the game of power. What are the lessons to take from the style of Babangida and Abacha? In Babangida and Abacha, Nigeria saw two faces of devastation. One dressed in dialogue, the other in domination. Both used control to maintain power, and both watched as that control consumed the very state they sought to shape. Neither left a nation stronger than they found it. Neither built enduring institutions, and neither, despite all their might, escaped the judgment of history. Like I said when we started the show, that in Nigeria, systemic corruption and neglect of critical infrastructure, including stifling of innovation, are similar to devastation. While this approach may ensure control for ruling elites, it comes at the cost of national development, creating a fragile state prone to rebellion and disintegration. For devastation may build empires in the short term, but it cannot nurture nations. And in the end, it is not how tightly a leader holds power that matters, but how wisely he lets it go. So there are key lessons for Nigeria. Machiavelli's analysis provides several lessons for Nigeria's political and social environment. Without addressing historical grievances and allowing for more inclusive governance, the memory of autonomy and liberty will continue to fuel rebellion. Concentrating power in corrupt elite and oligarchy undermines stability. Decentralization and equitable resource distribution could mitigate resentment and conflict. Leaders must build trust by engaging directly with citizens and addressing their concerns rather than ruling through proxies or exploiting regional divides. Devastation, whether physical, economic, breeds resentment. Investment in innovation, education, and job creation can counter cycles of poverty and violence. In essence, Nigeria's path to stability lies in recognizing the inherent flaws in oppressive governance and shifting towards a system that respects liberty, fosters innovation, and prioritizes equitable development. Without such change, the state risks perpetuating the cycles of rebellion and unrest.